2020 due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth and the local state of emergency declared by the Acton Board of Selectmen and Board of Health due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, the Board of Selectmen has suspended all public gatherings, and in accordance with the Governor's order, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The Governor's order allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations and/or committee votes of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comments. For this meeting, the Acton Finance Committee is convening by Zoom as posted in the meeting agenda, town's website calendar, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda, if applicable. After they conclude their remarks, I will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in colloquy with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. Do we have any citizens' comments for people out there? Not that I have any way to handle them. Luckily, we do not appear to. The first meeting on the agenda was to have a discussion with Brian explaining to us some things about the budget and reserve use guidance that the town has.
Chris,
yes.
Christy, can you hear me now?
We can.
You can, okay. I got this technology somewhat working. I'm using my phone and my computer, so.
Well, it's working for us. It's your chance to talk to us about tax increases and reserve policy and all that. I believe Christine discussed with you what we were hoping to hear.
Yeah, so one of the questions that Christine had is to mitigate the tax increase this year, we would use or supplement the use of reserves for the Proposition 2.5 increase. Now, Steve Barrett and I looked at this, and for fiscal 21, the 2.5 increase, we used 21 because the 2.5 increase is already set, it's already aligned, it's the net position 0, 22 is in flux, so it's hard because it's a moving target. So if we roll back and look at fiscal 21, it was about $2.1 million, $2.2 million. So if we didn't tax to the extent of Prop 2.5, we would have to use reserves to the extent of about $2.2 million to hold everybody harmless, so to speak. What that does is it just keeps the tax bills from going up that 2.5% plus the effect of, I think, of new growth. So on that track, if you look at doing it this year and next year, Steve and I believe that you'd be pretty much running out of free cash over the next couple of years. So one of the thoughts I know at one point is Christine brought up, again, to mitigate the increases in the debt exclusions that we just passed. But again, it's kind of after you've asked the citizens to override 2.5, and now you'd be doing kind of an underride. So I'm not sure. I mean, it's kind of treacherous water in some sense where our reserve position is going down. Certainly, it's something that can be brought up at the ALG. But that's kind of the impact of what 2.5 would do. So basically what you're doing is you're not taxed into 2.5. You're leaving an untaxed levy capacity of out there, $2.1, $2.2 million, and you're substituting that with free cash or reserves.
A few things. First of all, Steve Barrett said at one point that there is a Department of Revenue recommendation for having some percentage of turnbacks. I believe he said it was 3%. You know what that recommendation is?
Yeah, and I did follow up with him. Yeah, I did follow up with him on that, Christine, and I think Christy, and I think he said it's like 3.5%. I've yet to find that, but that was kind of our understanding. There's been guidelines out there from like GFOA, which talks about having your reserves at about 2 months of your total annual operations. So 2 months out of 12 months would be about 16%. So 16% on $100 million operation, you're looking at 16, $17 million in reserves. That's GFOA's kind of standard for looking at reserves. So there's a number of different ways you can look at
hold on a
this.
second, Brian. I was asking about turnbacks.
Yeah. So
when you said reserves, I presume you're talking total reserves, including stabilization fund.
I'm talking total reserves, correct. So turnbacks, he said about 3.5%. I believe I confirmed that with him, and that's what he said.
It would be helpful for me in these discussions if we could be more explicit about what we mean by reserves, because it seems to mean different things in different contexts. There are times when it's free cash, times when it includes the right. E&D or includes the stabilization fund. And, Steve.
Yeah, Brian, if you don't have it, could you get Steve Barrett to give us a DOR publication number, either a bulletin or an IGR that references any of that material? Because frankly, I don't study them all the time, but I don't recall seeing anything like that. Certainly, the Government Finance Officers Association is a wonderful organization, but it really doesn't have any bearing on what we do. The DOR does. The second thing is, of course, though we've kind of used the term turn back in this discussion, we're not dealing with the fact that the typically year produces a couple $1 million in turnbacks. So what would really be the impact of not increasing the taxes by $2 million, say in FY, what are we going into, 22? 21? I always get confused. If indeed, as has been proven time after time for at least the last 10 years, is we generally have turnbacks that are greater than our tax increase, making the argument that we didn't really need to do that tax increase. Now, I'll be the first one to argue for more reserves, and have been for years. But boy, the state's nickname for reserves is a rainy day fund. And if this isn't a rainy day, not just today, but the last 6 months, I haven't seen it. So if we're ever going to not tax for the full 2.5, and we've done it in the past, we haven't done it recently, but all that untaxed levy capacity that we've been talking about for the past few years, it came about by this type of thing. So I want to see the publications that say we need more reserves, and B, let's talk realistic about what the finance results of our town and schools look like each year. We increase the taxes, and then we underrun the budgets by more than we increase the taxes.
Jason.
Furthermore, we've had this reserve policy for at least 4 years now. This Acton reserve policy for at least 4 years now. And this is the first time that I've heard Brian or Steve Barrett bring to us that we are outside of some kind of state recommendations. Also, if we are so desperately low on our reserves, why do we have Board of Selectmen stating in public meetings that since we have all these excess reserves, we can do frivolous, stupid things with our money? So, no, I reject this outright.
Hold on a second, Jason. I think we had a little bit of telephone possibly in the statement about reserves getting too low. Brian, could you please speak to what I had heard was that the Department of Revenue contacted Steve with some concerns about the level we were spending reserves at, that maybe our reserve level was getting low?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was at the end of I think of fiscal 18. I think our reserve position after we went to town meeting. So what happens when you go into town meeting? State Department of Revenue has as reserve that money is allocated from reserves for the next fiscal year's budget before they certify your new free cash amount. So say if our free cash is 4 million, we go into town meeting in April, and we say we're going to use $2 million to subsequent the next fiscal year's budget. They have us pull that $2 million right out of that calculation, and they certify that new amount as of 6/30 of that fiscal year. At that point, it went down to about I think after that reserve use, I think we're as low as like about $900,000. Now we had a good year and we were able to replenish a lot of that, but it was the lowest point we had been at in a long time. So that kind of set up a flag with DOR. It also set up a flag with S&P, and they actually called us and they were wanted an explanation what was going on, because they're saying, hey, you're relying on a lot of reserve use to fund the budget. What gives? So we had a long conversation with S&P, and we told them that that was kind of the bottom, and we believe that we could start replenishing that, and we were going to build reserves, and that was going to, we're going to try to hold that true and go and have that as the floor, if you would, and then build from there, which we've done that. But that set up a flag with DOR, and it set up a flag with S&P.
Just 1 second to make sure that everyone's following this. When you're saying again they were concerned about reserves and the reserves level got down to 900,000, that's free cash reserves?
Free cash. I'm sorry, free cash. Yeah.
That's in addition to. So they do they take the stabilization fund into account?
They do.
Okay, Jason.
If that's the case, then our free cash, then our total reserves never have gotten anywhere near $900,000 because we've had $2 million in stabilization for multiple years now. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's true. Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Brian. We are sitting at currently around 5.6 million in free cash. In total reserves, free cash plus 2 million stabilization fund, as was recently as per the recent certification that we just received within the last 30 days.
That's correct.
You also said earlier that we were expected to be at approximately 16 million in reserves, 2 months worth of total operating costs. I take it we're allowed to take the 2 million in stabilization fund plus the remaining 3.6 that we have in free cash, plus some percentage of the school district's E&D when trying to get towards that $16 million number. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I believe it's everything, Jason. That's correct.
Fine. And we have not been anywhere near. We have not been anywhere near the 2 months of total aggregate reserves blended between free cash, Acton share of E&D, and stabilization fund for the entire time that I've been on this finance committee, which is going on 6 years now. So this definitely sounds like a new requirement. This goes to Steve Noon's comment about show us exactly where this was called out in the regs. I don't think anybody on this committee wants to sit at $16 million in reserves, blended aggregate reserves of any form. I think that's ridiculous. Furthermore, given where we are now, within the last couple of months, we have had elected officials in this town say that due to our flush cash position, we should be able to do these other things and other priorities. Both of these things cannot exist. They cannot both be true. We cannot be, on the one hand, woefully inadequate in the eyes of the state and super flush in the eyes of our elected officials. So something's got to give. And I'm asking what you think we should let give. If you feel we need to get better in tune with the state, then we're enlisting your help to push back against frivolous spending on the part of the town. Similarly, if you feel that the state is dead wrong, then we need to push back on the state to continue our profligate ways. Which isn't, sir?
Hold on a second, Jason. It is not Brian's job. He works for people to tell him what to do. It's not his job to take a position on this one. Brian, did you want to say something in response? You do not need to.
No, I was gonna basically say the same thing, that That's a discussion for ALG, Jason. That's not a discussion for me. I can't answer that. I mean, I have my own personal opinions, but it's really ALG's discussion, and I'm sure Christy and Christine will make that point, you know, to ALG if that's the FinCom's wish.
Steve.
Yeah, well, if it's 2018 information, then yeah, they were probably upset that we were using millions of dollars in reserves to buy land that we had no use for, which is my recollection of why reserves fell back then. However, we still have had our AAA bond rating reestablished or renewed, so it can't be that big a deal. Has the DOR changed the regional school district's limit on E&D to 16% from 5%?
Not aware, Steve, if they have.
That was a rhetorical question.
What are we really talking about?
And when I
Is it a rumor or is it?
when I say 16, and when I say 16%, that's GFOA. That's not the state.
I know who
So
they are.
that's-
I know it's not the states.
Right. All right. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that. So the state, right? And that's just a guideline. They just, you know, their comment is they recommend at a minimum that general purpose governments, regardless of size, maintain unrestricted budgetary fund balance in their general fund of no less than 2 months of regular general fund operating revenues or regular general fund operating expenses. So, I mean, do the math. It's 2 months out of 12 months, 16, 17%. It's a guideline.
If I may, Madam Chair, I look at it and that's like another $10 million. That's a 20% tax increase. So I don't see
it would include
going.
Christine.
Brian, if I remember correctly, the conversation that you and I had with Steve, the informal guidelines for the finance department are really more between 5 and 8 million, between 5% and 8% of overall spending. Is that right?
I thought it was 2 to 5.
I think it was 3% of. Yeah, so Steve and I refer to it as our bandwidth. Our bandwidth was probably like twice the bandwidth of the FinCom's bandwidth, meaning that I believe it was 3% of total spending was pretty much our targeted floor versus the 8%, which was the high. That was kind of a draft policy that we had done. It still hasn't been codified and you know, in written in stone yet. And Steve is presently working on that, but you know, we'll be developing that, I'm sure, over the next several weeks or so.
Okay, and then did I also understand you both correctly in that the only reason we were able to get back to a reasonable turn back this particular year is because we did restrict spending and we didn't use the budget the way we originally intended, and there were hiring freezes and other things we didn't take advantage of, that going forward there isn't a lot more to squeeze, and that you are expecting turnbacks in revenues to take a hit because of the current COVID situation. Is that an accurate read of your expectations going forward?
I mean, it's you know that it's hard to say. I know we're working on Q1 results right now, which I think will be a telltale sign of where things are going. And even at that, it's 3 months under your belt. You know, our revenues are not linear, so you can't extrapolate out. Some of it we don't get until the second half of the year. A lot of the Board of Selectmen's fees and licenses come in at the end of this calendar year. So we still got a ways to go. The state has not, you know, set their final budget yet, so we still don't know. They're going to hold, we believe, harmless with Chapter 70 and unrestricted general government aid, which is the bulk of our state aid. What's going to happen with the other components of state aid? It's small, but you know, it all adds up. We're not sure. We haven't heard. So I think the thing is, Christine, is you're absolutely right. I mean, we had a turn back this year because John shut down some of our operations, so we were able to save as far as, you know, freeze on new hires and a freeze on discretionary spending, and then we just really kind of squeeze things out, and we hobbled into year end. We could have some energy savings as well as buildings weren't open, so we could save some money there. Is that going to continue to happen as we get into the winter here? I'm not sure. It looks like, things are, there's hot flashes and pop-ups everywhere, and it's shutting buildings down and facilities down again. Is that going to continue on? Still very early. I mean, we've got so much, we need to look at and review before we can decide or even make a prediction of where things are going. And I think Q2, once we have Q2 results, that'll give us some guidance. It's not the telltale sign, like I said, because that's 3 months of revenues under our belt, and a lot of our revenues, especially with local receipts, come in this latter half of the year. So it's still early.
I'm confused about something you said there, Brian. You said that the reason we have turnbacks is because of effectively a significant freeze on spending. Does that mean that we had no expectation of revenues in excess of spending last year?
We actually were anticipating revenues that exceeded our budgetary numbers, but those revenues came in right at the pin. So we did not make any money on revenues last year at 6/30. So if you can imagine everything shutting down in March and April and May and June, building permits, license fees, areas where we would typically make money, there was a significant slowdown. So we were probably expecting a pretty good year, probably beating our revenues by $400,000 or $500,000. Didn't happen in Christie. So we were very cautious. So we talked to John about that, and that's why we had that spending freeze. So we said you're only going to spend on absolutely necessary things. So any other discretionary spending stopped. All the new hires and the vacant positions stopped. So we saved money in salaries, we saved money in benefits, the discretionary spending, and then, like I said, some of the utility costs we saved. That was pretty much most of this year's turn back.
Steve?
Yeah, Brian, and that was a commendable job this year. But if you look back at every year, I think I looked from FY11 on through FY19, we have a turn back every year. And we don't have a spending freeze every year. On average, yes, we turn back as much as we tax with the 2.5%. And that's year in, year out. So what you're saying about this year is absolutely true, but the year before it was another set of circumstances, but the turnback was still there. So I don't think it eliminates the possibility of doing something to lessen the burden on our taxpayers this coming year. I do think that if there are unreimbursed COVID-related costs, that would be something we would have to look at and possibly adjust for. Maybe we don't do the full 2.5%, but on balance, I think if our residents, taxpayers ever needed help, this is when they need it. We have a very high level of unemployment in the town, the highest I've ever seen. We have a high level of people who are dealing with wages that have been and salaries that have been reduced, and we have a fair number of renters in this town too that could be falling behind in their rent and facing eviction. So I think if we're ever going to help out the taxpayers, this is the year we should be thinking about it.
Anyone else have any more questions? Or Roland?
I agree with Steve. I would also like to see a spreadsheet of what debt we have out there and when that is rolling off the tax rolls, so to speak. Because I know we've bonded, all the years I've been in town, 15 years, seems like every year we have a bond going off the summer. And I'd like to see what the year was that we had at a town meeting, when it was issued, percentage, what it was for, and when does it end. So we have an idea of what's, and what basically what the payment is each year too. So we know if next year we have $600,000 not being paid off for bonding, it's already been coming off the tax rolls. I think that'd be some useful information that we would know about. But then now you have another $600,000. mandatory hypothetical, but that's something that I think we should be aware of, also to look at. And again, I agree with Steve, that, this is the year to do it.
Anyone else? Hold on one second. I have a question for this. There has been some discussion that it will take possibly 18 months to get FEMA reimbursements. Is that, how would we represent that in the budget? It's money we have spent that we expect to get back. But if it's 18 months, we're looking at a different fiscal year. So Brian, how do y'all handle that in terms of budgeting?
So FEMA is reimbursements slow. Historically, they've been slow. It's my understanding that they're going to try to expedite matters this year because of the circumstance. So State Department of Revenue allows us to have deficit spending. So right now, there's certain things that we can deficit spend for, and they do in some cases, and I'm not sure off the top of my head whether FEMA reimbursement monies, whether they hit our free cash number for that or not. I don't know off the top of my head, Christy, but I can find out from you. I know the CARES Act money, they specifically don't because of the situation, so you can deficit spend that and they won't adjust your free cash certification. That I'll research that and get back to you.
Thank you.
But I do understand that they are trying to expedite that reimbursement.
Mike?
Yeah, since the ALG is really a 5-year budget, I'm sure when that FEMA money shows up, it won't be a budget item. It'll just show up as unexpected revenue, and our budget will look favorable in that year that we receive the dough. But I think it will be difficult to forecast it or put it as a line item in the budget as expected revenue or expense reimbursement. So I just, when it shows up, and hallelujah.
I wanted to raise one more point for everyone's thought on this. The idea of raising how much we raise our taxes is not only important for how do we help people out this year, but taxes effectively compound over time. Raising it by 3% this year means that 2.5% the next year or 3.5% the next year is built on top of the previous year. So any year in which we can slow it down actually helps us further out than just that 1 year, which is part of the beauty of the debt exclusions. So that's something to just, because they're not building the tax base. I'm saying it for the people who aren't us. So something to keep in mind in our thinking about our recommendations and thoughts about this going forward. Any more questions for Brian? Statements to make? All right, thank you. At this point, Brian, we were going to speak, I believe, at our next meeting about last year's fiscal results and the Q1 results. Is that correct? Anything else?
That's correct.
Anything else you think we should know?
No, not at this point. I mean, just no, I think that's pretty much it. So we'll kind of give you an update on FY20. There's probably not a whole lot more to report there. Of course, we still got to go through the audit. But as far as Q1 results, we'll have a better handle on numbers. We're running numbers right now. And so we'll have a full report for the next meeting.
Thank you. And could you please invite John Benson up to be a panelist so we can ask him for any Board of Selectmen updates? John, are you there? Would you like to share anything with us?
Yeah, I had sent out my BOS updates on October 6th after our meeting on the 5th, so that gets us
I think the point that you might be most interested in is we took action to delay town meeting 2021 from the start date of April 6th to an undetermined date, but on or before June 30th. We're probably looking, we have to coordinate with the schools on the date when they would be closed. Both of our two successful town meetings, spring and fall, or summer and fall, were done when school was not in session, June 29th and September the 8th. So we're likely looking at a meeting in mid-June. I had reached out to Peter Light, but he had been away as to when he anticipated the close of school, but it's not a date we have to get to yet. I think the important thing for you people and John and the select board is that under Charter Chapter 6, he has to submit his budget to both boards within not less than 100 days before town meeting. So normally it's done in early December. If we have a June 15th town meeting, we're looking at a budget submission about the 1st of March. The thought was that he and both John Peterson on the school side wanted to see how revenues were coming in so they could appropriately think it through. Other update was I had followed up on several of Steve Noon's comments about how we don't really see the impact of recessions until 2 or 3 years in. So I had asked Steve and Brian to track that from the Great Recession of 2008, 2010, and they seem to be on the local receipt side. And I provided you that breakdown in an email last week. So I think that's about where I am.
Thank you. Any questions for John? All right, I don't see any. Thank you. Brian, could you please move John back to being an attendee, and we'll get on to looking at the point of view. Christine, would you like to share your screen for this? Is that the best way?
I will. I'm expecting this to go really fast because I got such low feedback that you must have just all thought it was amazing and didn't require a lot of work. I'm going to come out of this because I can't see my notes if I do this. All right, we'll just do that. There we go.
I'm not sure if I can, I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I can move John or I have to remove him. I don't know if I can demote him.
Okay. I have done it before, but I don't remember how.
Yeah, me either. I don't see the option here.
You just perma-mute him. Okay. Here we go. So this slide has only changed in that I made sure that all of our slides are dealing with the median household income, which Roland brought up was the disparity. I had household on one side and family on the other. They actually were all household, and it is a different number. Household is lower than family, but this is a slide that we've used for years now, so I'm just going to move on. And this one, likewise, very few changes. If any, since the last we spoke.
So again, that reserves is free cash plus stabilization fund.
Stabilization fund, yes, exactly.
Roland.
I thought that the number was 5.6 and not 5.75. I could be wrong.
The last number I had from Brian is 5.75.
The number's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I honestly can't remember if this is new or not. I I think it's not. I think the change here is that this was a median family income, but it's actually medium household income.
Is that the same number that was on slide number 3? Is
No.
slide number 3?
So it's not, and I'll tell you why. This is the median household income today. Like if I go out to the
Yeah, no, I get
Department of
that.
Revenue site, I can get this number right now, and this is what it is.
Okay.
And this is what it was in January when the median household income was published by like the census.gov site.
So FY20, it's at, so when you look at this chart, FY17, you know, I would think that 137 number would be somewhere in one of these years.
Yeah, it should in theory be actually that number would be FY21 technically.
So from FY20 to FY21, it substantially went down then.
It substantially goes down, and I think as long as we call that out when we're talking about this, it actually tells quite a story.
That needs to be on this chart.
It can be. I mean, should it be in the talking points, or do you want it? I can't get you all of the numbers for FY21. I can't tell you what the median home value is going to be.
Well, could we?
Well, if we know the other things, it can be as of like October 1st or some such.
I think maybe just eliminate FY17.
It's you're asking me to prognosticate a little.
All of this is.
No. Everything from
Number needs to be on this page. We need to find some way to show it because that tax burden is a significant increase.
Yeah, or what it is today.
Yep, that's true. All right, I'll get what I can for a today column. But one thing that I find interesting about this is the consistent tax burden increase of almost $500 or $600 a year.
Well, when you look at it from FY17 to FY20, you're almost looking at $2,000. Pretty close. That's quite a substantial jump in a short period of time.
Right.
Death and taxes.
We took on a lot of debt service and
And part of that can be explained, obviously, that's happening. That's why I would like to have some kind of spreadsheet or some kind of chart that we could put in here showing what debt is rolling off. Maybe we could have that as an appendix.
That's in here, sort of.
and that's not. You mean something other than the debt service chart? Or are you looking specifically for the little debt?
Yeah, specific to it. Like, okay, in FY 2005, we bought a new fire engine. It was $500,000, and that debt is going to be done by FY 22, and then FY 21. So we're out of that burden, so to speak. That's the type of thing that I think maybe as an appendix, not as maybe an actual chart that would be able to show that somehow.
Okay.
That's all. I mean, neither here nor there, but it's kind of important especially for longer range planning.
Right. Okay. I'll work on getting that information and getting it into the.
Our discussion at ALG last time, we talked about the increase in unemployment rate in the town compared to historically, and John Peterson specifically said, well, we need to look at what that really means for the town. And I think the strongest argument for things aren't the way everyone would like to believe them to be is that significant drop in median household income. I'd be really curious to know how many years back you have to go to get to anywhere close. It was 137,000 or some such.
Yeah, and we've got a 6.6% unemployment rate.
Yeah.
So
but I think that represents something that we discussed in here, that people aren't just losing their jobs. There are a number of people who have kept their jobs but have lower income.
Yeah.
And it's easy to just look at unemployment rate and in some ways say, well, that's higher than it used to be, but that's not.
It may also include people who are now staying home to care for kids or family.
Yeah.
Christine, can I make a comment?
Yes.
I just want to point out that talking recessions to recessions, apples to apples and oranges, the 2008 recession was was caused by, credit becoming unavailable in the marketplace, which is a much different situation than increase in unemployment and decreases in wages. I think as we consider these things going forward, it's important that we take into account that the situation we're facing is potentially much more dire in terms of real impact than the situation from 2008, which was really just a credit freeze, versus this is a real evaporation of income. So just for everyone to keep that in mind.
Thanks, I agree.
And for the sake of record keeping, that was Adam Milby.
Yeah. Okay, demographically, this hasn't changed. We presented this last year and found that it had a lot of impact in understanding who our taxpayers are and in what they're funding, which is this. But again, this is just taken right from our warrant, so there's no real news here. This is a new slide that somebody asked for, and I was able to find.
Did you find out what SBAB stands for?
That's the Parker Damon building.
Yeah. What
I don't know what it stands for, but that's what that debt refers to.
It refers to the school building authority bond or something like that.
Okay.
Thank you.
So this sort of contains the data you're looking for as well, Roland, though it doesn't have roll-off dates, which you're looking for.
That's the outstanding debt, the $923,000.
No.
Or is that's reimbursement that we are getting from SB whatever? That's a reimbursement that we're getting for that building. Is that it?
I think it's what we're paying outside of Prop 2.5.
That wouldn't be a revenue source then.
Steve, do you want to take this one on?
Steve, unmute Steve.
If you look at the top of the ALG spreadsheet, this is listed under revenue sources.
It is.
And I keep flipping my head back and forth on understanding or not why it is listed there. Can anyone explain that?
Yeah, that is a reimbursement. So that's the money we're getting to reduce the twin schools' debt. So it is a revenue source, but it's strictly to reduce the school's debt. So it's a dedicated receipt.
So why is the fire station listed there as well?
Because that's a dedicated receipt. So they show at the top of ALG, on the top of the spreadsheet, but they're specifically for certain allocations. So so that debt service is specific. So that money we put there because we gotta make sure we have that $75,000 to handle that debt service payment. We handle that SBAB reimbursement the same way. That money comes in, but it's specifically allocated to reduce the twin school. It's a little funky. I get it.
Because it looks like because when I read this, it says, okay, we're having a revenue source, which means that revenues are coming into the town, into the town books. So somebody's giving us $75,000 for the North Acton Fire Station debt, or somebody's giving us $2.906,270 for the elementary school debt, or $335,426 for Minuteman. So it's not really a revenue source.
No, or is this the money that's coming from the state to reimburse?
Yeah. It's income, it's revenue.
So
This is the precursor of the MSBA. This is the MSBA reimbursement for the building that we started 20 years ago.
yeah, this is the Parker Damon reimbursement. The other ones are, the revenue for like their fire station or Minuteman is the the tax overrides that we passed.
Yeah,
It's,
that's what I thought.
those are specifically tied to those projects, and when they're done, they'll roll off. So that's why it's shown as a revenue. It goes in at the top and comes down at the bottom, and so it doesn't really impact much.
But those could all be rolled into the debt exclusion number.
They're all debt exclusion, capital or debt exclusions, one way or another.
What I'm saying is they don't need to be broken out individually, I don't think.
They don't.
Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, if this chart basically shows a pie that's worth $104 million. So there really should be a pie chart so that you see how big those slices are that contribute to income or revenue. I think it would be more helpful that it would obviously say that 90% of or 88% of our income is the tax levy, and just tiny pieces are the other line items.
Okay.
It would be helpful to have the fiscal year on here.
Yes, I just pulled this from the ALG spreadsheet, so yes, I will pie chart it and date it.
Thank you.
Steve.
Yeah, to try and answer Roland's question, the public safety debt ends in fiscal 24. The junior high, senior high debt rolls off in 25. The Parker Damon SBAB rolls off in 25. So things are dropping off really in the next few years.
And that's sort of shown here in the debt service slide. And if you look at the notes on the debt service slide, if you can see them, I don't know if they're readable on your screen, but I was able to just get a little more detail about each line item.
You might want to put like if it's just completed in 2001, debt to roll off in 20. What did you say? 2020, 2025.
Okay.
Just so it's if we need those speaking points, we have them.
The total town other rolls off in 2025, as we can see. Does it matter to you which part, Acton Public Safety, NARA, Acton Memorial Library, which is part of that, rolls off?
Yeah, because Steve just said, the public safety rolls off in 2024. I don't know when the other ones roll off. So
well, the whole thing ends here, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the blue.
I think you're looking at presenting people with too much data if we include that at this level.
But I think we just have it in the footnotes, people just got to see the slide. The footnotes will be our talking points for the year.
Okay. Yep, in case anybody asks, it's good for us to have that information on hand anyway. And I feel like it's a question that's come up over the last few years, regardless. Also, I can only see, I don't know how many people Christy can see, but I can only see 4. So if people have questions or thoughts.
Are these all excluded debt?
Yes, I believe so.
Is Brian still here?
I think he's host. I think he has to be.
No, looking at this chart, it looks like it's all excluded debt. As far as I can tell, I mean, I'd have to see the actual numbers behind each bar, but that's what it looks like to me.
I feel like there's some value in pointing that out to people, but maybe it's too subtle of a point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And then on to our concerns and recommendations. I think I was hoping for a little more fleshing out of some of these slides, but yes, go ahead, Christy.
Can we add a point about how the median income has dropped?
Yes.
And even be good to say back to the level of some year, like 2014 or whatever level.
Isn't that householding?
Yes.
Use the same wording that was on the slide 3.
Okay, I will. It really doesn't want me to do that. All right. That's just
Christine?
Yeah.
Christine?
Yeah.
This slide prompts me to ask Brian a question, which is basis what had happened in the past on these decreases in revenue. How is the town going to be forecasting for this in the upcoming years? Is it going to be like a ramping up and then a rolling off, going up years 3, 4, and 5, and then rolling down in years, 6 and 7? How are they planning on accounting for this expected shortfall or projecting it?
What expected shortfall?
So we're making a comparison.
Oh, gotcha.
How things decreased during the last recession, right?
You mean the things at the bottom bullet point?
Yes.
Gotcha.
So my question is, how is the town going to be, putting this in their planning and their pro forma statements going forward, if that can be answered at this time or not?
Oh, not
I
again,
don't
right?
have I don't have a. No, sorry, I don't have a precise answer for you, Adam. But I'm assuming, like we did in the past, number of ways we mitigate that. I'm sure one of it is look at ways we can cut and mitigate, budget increases to accommodate for some of these losses. And then also, is it going to be a greater use of reserves to fill some of these gaps? I'm sure everything's going to be in flux right now. We have ALG, which is going to be part of that discussion. So I think that's where all that action is really going to happen. We have to get a consensus. It's not just the town, but it's also the regional school district as well. So I think that discussion is going to be huge going forward. I can only tell you what happened in the past. I wish I had a crystal ball that could tell you going forward what's going to happen. But very good point, and I think that's going to consume a lot of our time this year in looking forward. And as we get more information from the state, as we get Q1 under our belt and we analyze the data, as we get Q2 under our belt and we analyze the data, and we start looking at trends, motor vehicle, and that's anybody's guess right now. I was hearing that 20% on motor vehicle was the number this year that they saw declining, and the numbers were starting to crawl back. What does that mean for motor vehicle excise? It's tough because motor vehicle excise is comprised of not just all new vehicles, but existing vehicles. It's a big mix. Does it mean that a 20% reduction in new motor vehicles is going to be a 20% reduction in motor vehicle excise tax? I'm not sure if they go hand in hand. So all these things are going to be reviewed and looked at. So great question. More to come, I'm sure.
Thanks, Brian.
Steve?
Yeah, that specific one, the last time, it took us many years to get excise taxes back up to where they've been pre-recession because people just did not buy new cars.
Isha, were you trying to say something? Take that as a no.
Okay. I believe this is our overall recommendation. Yes, Steve.
I'd really like to pick up where I left off last time on this recession is going to be with us for a while, and the impacts, like I said, and John Benson confirmed that they're long-lasting effects. So I really would like to say with it, we should form another joint 3-board cost savings study group to look at potential long-term savings that we can do.
That was very poorly received.
Yes.
I would greatly appreciate help coming up with a good way to present that idea because it was very, very roundly rejected. There were some, I think aspersions might be We were not well respected for having brought forward that idea. Christine.
So some of the pushback was simply the idea that both the town and the schools are feeling incredibly strapped for time and effort, and that it might be difficult to put the right amount of energy into such an effort. Some of the pushback was that by someone who worked for the town the last time we did this, and I
See,
believe
there's no reason to not say who it was.
Okay, so Dean Charter said that it was caused more trouble than it saved, and then it was also said to be a condescending endeavor. So that's the initial response.
The last time, the first initiative came out of the Finance Committee, and we started our own, and then other boards decided it would be probably best not to let us run amok by ourselves, so that it expanded into a three-board meeting. Am I surprised that they don't want to do it? Not at all. I don't think anybody wanted to do it the last time. We can wait a year when the impacts are obvious and we're hurting. And then the things you have to do are a little bit more painful, draconian, and yeah, I guess I could agree with Dean. But much of what happened the last time, people got into questioning individual fiefdoms, you know. Why did we have a rec department and community ed? Why did we? They asked some very basic questions about how we are organized and how we accomplish the business of the town and schools. Different environment than APS or grades K through 6 were part of the town. But you know, to say that once every 10 or 12 years you can't find the time to look at potential cost savings when every year we seem to be able to find the time to spend money is pretty disingenuous. And so my reaction to them, and I'm speaking only as one member of the FinCom, is fine. If you don't want to do it cooperatively, maybe we'll start our own.
Thank you.
Do we want to see, as a group, a recommendation for some form of three-board cost-saving initiative as a recommendation on this slide?
I think it's called for.
Yes.
I agree.
Okay.
I also think that on this slide, you're letting them off a little easy. I believe we have said in the last two meetings, this one included, that we definitely do want to have, you know, saying spend cautiously is a little amorphous. It can be subject to someone's opinion. Yes, of course we're spending cautiously. I believe we should say something a little more deterministic. I believe multiple members have said that we do not want to tax the max this year. So do we want to say on this that we, you know, I believe we've said we want to have a 0% raise in taxes. If that's untenable, do we want to settle on a 0.5% or a 1%? But a 2.5% plus new growth this year, I believe, is not what anybody on this, well, is not what the majority of this committee wants. So saying spend cautiously and limit tax increases is not deterministic enough. Do we want to put a hard number on this?
Now, Christine, you, I believe, spoke with Steve and Brian some about reasonable, that's not the right word, about tax increase levels that were actually feasible. Is that correct?
I like minimum acceptable, something along those lines.
Again, what is that? How are you defining minimum acceptable?
Sure, but how are we going to come up with a hard and fast percentage without knowing where we are fiscally over the next few months?
Well, luckily we have time. We don't need this answer today. Steve?
Yeah, I would just say limit tax increases to less than 2.5%. Leave ourselves some options.
I worry that by leaving options, it becomes all too easy to say, well, we met your guidance. We came in at 2.4.
Well, it's September. Budget season could be long this year.
Well, and budget season is officially longer than normal because they've explicitly said they want to push until June. I'm having been told in the past, hey, we met your guidance, when they did not meet the spirit of they met the letter of the law, not the spirit of the law, so to speak. I'm keen to be a little more deterministic in our verbiage.
I'm happy with 0, but like I said earlier, I'm a little concerned about unreimbursed COVID expenses. But that's about the only wiggle room I'm willing to go on in terms of considering something other than 0.
I mean,
How about no or limited tax increases?
I think that limited, I wonder if limited, if it's no or limited, as Isha says, does that suggest to all of you even less than 2.5%?
Yeah. Well, no does.
I know, we were just trying to get different fuzzy language, but no or limited is less concrete and yet still suggests.
How about minimal?
Less than 2.5%.
I think to answer Jason's question to me, which was, define minimum acceptable, would be
right.
what is the maximum amount that we can raise the taxes and still operate fiscally as a town, or what is the minimum amount that we can the maximum rate we would raise it is the minimum amount that we can survive and still operate as a town, which in some instances might be a tax cut, but that's the definition.
That'd be wonderful. So my understanding, and please correct me someone out there if I'm wrong, but given that so much of our expenses are based on salaries and so many of those are based on contracts, we have a specific amount. We know what a good chunk of the budget is going to change every year.
Yeah.
So we have, I think, in many ways, a limited range in which we can do any sort of arguing about what the budget should be, and I would love to see what that range is. How much of the budget is already set in stone based on commitments?
Well, I think that speaks to the necessity of looking at things more holistically and certainly identifying opportunities for cost savings as well as tax savings, seems like, or revenue generation.
I can save $100,000 off by not building a bathroom in town hall.
Well, there's that and $165,000 for for-profit companies, but
Okay. I think we need to move on, Madam Chair.
I think that was
right there.
Hang on.
All right, next slide. Well, here we go.
This is an oldie but goodie. Updated a little just with the New Year's numbers, and I did find it interesting that the school and town, as far as a percentage of their budgets, are actually a little closer to each other this year than they were in previous years, in that the schools had previously been in the 80% range. COVID times being what they are, they've come down a little.
Well, this isn't COVID times.
Budgeting for COVID times?
The first half of COVID times? 'Cause
They're
they-
locked in, but there are shifts in personnel, and I assume salaries and fringes includes everything, maintenance, assistance, even non, contract.
But I thought they'd had to hire more staff, et cetera, to handle the remote school and things. I know they'd moved some people around and
All I can say for sure is that we were in the 80% range last year and the year before, and we're down this year as a percentage of their budget. So anyway,
we had discussed something about putting in some information about the contracts in general, or maybe trying to understand that more up on the people concerns. The school has strategically made it so that all of their contracts align to be renegotiated together at the same time. I don't know enough about contracts or any strategy around them. Does that make sense to other people? Is that anything we should, as a group, should be talking about? Mike?
Yeah, I think with the contract, with their collective bargaining agreements, we literally have no say in what goes on there. And it's been a source of contention between FinCom and like the schools and everyone else for years. So I wouldn't put a lot of energy into that because you're not going to get anywhere. We have zero influence on those collective bargaining agreements.
So it's not worth talking about.
Correct.
Yeah, I agree with Mike, and my recollection is that the schools just finished that bargaining agreement in spring, did they not?
Yes.
And it's good for like 3 or 5 years or something.
Yeah, but it sounds like they start renegotiating the next round pretty soon. So if we had any thoughts we wanted to be forming, that would be a good time.
Well, in that case, they should not be getting any raises in the next, bargaining agreement, considering a lot of people are getting pay cuts at this point in time.
Steve?
Yeah, they typically negotiate 3-year contracts. I think that's the maximum you can do. We are currently in a period of time when the healthcare cost is open to renegotiation. It opens and closes every 3 years as well with the coalition bargaining. So there is the opportunity to talk about that. So that's part of compensation as well. In fact, it's a pretty big part of compensation. So.
I just want to officially say that I do not believe that the teachers should receive no salary increases in the next bargaining. But I won't be at the table. I just want to put that out there.
Don't worry, it's not going to happen that way anyway.
Sure. I don't know. That was a little strong for me.
In the last,
you don't have to worry about that.
In the last recession, the teachers did agree to take a 1-year zero COLA, in the contract. So it's not unheard of. I think all the both the teachers and the rest of the municipal unions all took 1 year at zero.
Okay.
Well, that's good to know that there is this sentiment that we are more all in it together than.
But it's again, so if you don't ask, it's never going to happen. So to your cold reception of the cost savings initiative.
This is also an unusual recession in that.
You get them going. First, you got to start the process, and then you start asking the questions.
This is also unusual in that the teachers are the ones we're, counting pretty heavily on in a lot of ways. That wasn't the case last time. Okay, so OPEB, has been a priority of ours for years, but until the situation changes, I think asking them to continue to at least fund at current levels is the best that we can do. Steve, I think the numbers as far as the decrease of 452,000 and the increase of 1.8 million are numbers you gave me.
Okay, I'll have to take a look at the new reports then.
Okay, great. Yeah, if you could update those, that would be fantastic.
Okay.
Otherwise, it should be fairly unchanged. And again, our recommendation is we would like to see the school up to $1.6 million a year. That's not going to happen at this time. So it's on the long-term wish list.
Yeah, but the long-term wish list should not turn into something we ignore for 5 years.
No, but if we're in COVID for 5 years, we're going to have bigger problems.
You also take care of what you can. It all adds up.
Yeah.
Steve?
To put a morbid spin on it, if we're in have COVID for 5 years, our OPEB problem will be lessened.
Oh, that's, yeah.
Unfortunate but true.
All right. Future capital projects. According to the capital projects list on last year's budget. So we've got a little more detail on this slide than we've had in the past.
I'm sorry. Well, why are we calling it under the Lawsbrook Bridge? Isn't that the same as $1.2 million?
Yeah.
It is.
And the 5.4? That's just a weird way to write it.
Oh, you know what? I pulled it out of that spreadsheet, and I think because I started with the 250K, I just kept it consistent. But if you'd rather me change it to M, I can.
Well, and then have that not be a comma.
1,000, a million, what's the difference?
I believe that was in my. I believe that Everett Jerkson quote was in my speech.
All those zeros are a whole lot of nothing, right?
Yep.
Brian, do we have any idea? I couldn't find in that spreadsheet anything about the water treatment plant, but I know we've had repairs and upgrades to the water treatment plant on our 1 to 5 year capital plan for a long time. Is that something? Do you happen to know if the town is looking at that, or maybe asking?
Is it a town or is it the water district? Remember, those are two separate entities.
You mean wastewater?
Yeah, that was going to be my question, Jason. Right.
I think
Is
it's
this the sewage
wastewater.
treatment plant? Because I think the sewage treatment plant's in there for some upgrades and some repairs.
It should be
So I think
wastewater.
it's maybe. It is. Yeah, I think it is wastewater.
Water.
Oh, I did that. Sorry. Yeah, I don't know. It's getting late. It's past my bedtime.
Well, that's an enterprise fund, so you know it's capital, but it's not borne by the general taxpayers.
Oh, then do we? I mean, it's been on our slides for a few years. Do we want them on our slides? If it's not going to impact the tax.
All part of taxation. It all comes from us. So yes.
Well,
No. That
and
was.
if it's anything within a 5-year time frame, my suggestion is that we should at least have a guesstimate as to what that dollar figure would be, just like we have for some of the other bullet points.
Agreed. Yes.
This isn't general taxation. This is the betterments and usage fees.
Is it just that? Okay, then again, it's just been on here for a few years. I think that we pull it if it's not.
It's not going to be paid for out of the general fund or any of the. I mean, it'll be from the.
I believe the debt will be general obligation if they have to borrow money to do it, but the debt service will be paid through the enterprise fund, which is betterments and O&M costs. It's only paid by the user, not by the general taxpayers.
So it's paid by a subset of taxpayers, and then maybe we do leave it in, but we.
So maybe we break it out into a separate bullet and clarify that.
Yeah.
I think it's getting too confusing.
Let me see if I can, or even if it's just got a star and there's some sort of.
I like star.
Explanation. So yeah.
Yeah, just footnote it. Thank you.
I will. Okay, and then we've had updates to the existing fire stations on our radar for a while too, but again, those weren't spelled out in great detail on the capital improvement spreadsheet. So I'm
Yeah,
not-
if we don't have a dollar number there, it should not be on the slide, I don't think.
We need it. I don't think we can take it off just because we don't have a number. Similar to the wastewater treatment plant, I think they're looking into it right now. So I think that's why we don't have a number.
right.
There's numbers on the existing fire station. I've seen them in the past.
Okay. So I just need to locate them. Isha, actually, for history, we didn't actually have numbers on any of these, and a bunch of them weren't on our radar. So this is the first year that I've been able to add some numbers. So then it
But
really shows that we didn't have numbers on the old ones and that we probably should have. So yeah, I totally
no,
agree with you.
I don't know how we can make decisions without having data on any of these things. Yeah.
I'm confused about the 2 dams. I thought it was going to be 1.2 million just to do the River Street Dam. Frankly, I don't know where the Bellows Farm Dam is.
I think though, I think that I don't either. I just, again, I pulled these from the capital improvement plan in the budget from January. And I think that the dam came in less than they expected.
My recollection in recent meetings we've had is that the town discussed a number of about 1.2 million, I thought, just for the River Street Dam. And am I wrong in that figure? But there
I'd
was
like to
also
look into that.
a portion of it that would be paid for by some kind of state or federal grant, I recall.
So maybe this is just what our portion is going to cost.
That could be.
So
I thought
by its own asterisks.
I thought there was on the dam, I thought there was a way that we were going to be able to go to the state, somehow reach the dam so that it would not cost much or to rebuild the dam.
Okay.
So I that's what I recall, something on that. I'm not sure. Maybe John Benson could elaborate on that. I don't know. That's something that I recall that I just do not have. I just do not recall 100% what that was.
Okay. So I will clear up the details on the spending, and I'll stop messing with my screen. I forgot you were seeing it. Okay. I think that this is fairly concise. I've done some changes on the reserve slide. It may have too much on it. But there was a request to understand the reserves as they compared to the overall budget and what percentage of the total operating budget that was. So it is all now here. Does it make sense? And is it useful?
Yeah, this is much better.
I like it.
That's good. I think the last time should be 5.75, but anyway, I don't know if we get there.
Yeah, she can round up. It's fine. Close enough.
I rounded up on all of these.
Okay.
Or down, accordingly.
I think that's good.
Now, did we want to overlay our recommendation, our floor and ceiling against it? No.
Well, I think we should at least know what our floor and ceiling are. And I think that in our next meeting, we should be prepared to have a complete discussion regarding the DOR's recommendations, our current reserve policy, and the finance department's general policy. And if their policy is at 8%, if their ceiling's at 8 and ours is at 5, do we want them to align? And it's been a few years since we all went through, and I say we, I wasn't there, the reserve policy floor ceiling debate. And I'm wondering if we want to have it, set it for the next few years, and then in our notes section, we can recommend where we maintain a healthy balance, what percentage.
So just for historical context, Madam Chair, just for historical context, there were members of the committee at the time that wanted the floor to be 0 and wanted us to get to a very low number. Many of us on the committee fought to get that, I believe it was a 3% municipal floor put into place. That said, we've been above our own ceiling for multiple years. We might finally only be within our own guidance because the overall budget has grown $6 million, which makes a difference on our percentage rather significantly. But we've been beyond our ceiling for 2 or 3 years now, and we may only just be, by the luck of the numbers, below our own ceiling at this point. And now, to Steve Noon's point, if ever is the time to use the rainy day fund, now's the time to do it. So while I was absolutely one of the members who fought hard to put in a floor, I definitely believe that the circumstances now are that we should be closer to the floor than to the ceiling.
Christy, are you okay with having a discussion about our reserve policy for our next meeting?
Yes.
Because once that's set and we decide whether or not we align with the finance department or we continue to be below the finance department, then we can have the continued conversation of what we would recommend as far as reserves use for this year.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm glad that this slide is useful and not too busy.
Actually, for the sake of discussion next time, how hard would it be for you to make us a slide with those lines?
It would be super fun.
Because I would love to see that just for discussion, not to have in the presentation.
I'll make it happen. I'll somehow make that happen. Excel will not make it happen. That's too much for them, but I'll there's a way.
Gold star, Kristen, gold star.
So we'll figure something out. Because I agree that would be useful to see, sort of what our shadow section of what our recommended range is.
Yeah.
Okay. This slide may change after our conversation at our next meeting, but for now, this has been our policy, and so hopefully it still is. Not a lot changed about our land purchases. We just felt that it was important from our last conversation to keep these up, to outline the history we've had of land purchases that we may not have always done in a fiscally responsible way. And then our
now this takes this ignores the purchase we just made of the Piper Land property. How do we want to include that in here?
Was out of CPC funds?
We're basically saying we didn't buy it.
Do we want to include it?
I think you need to explain why it's not here, if it's not here.
Well, I think you still got to keep in mind when you're talking about CPC funds, it's still a tax. We're still paying. Even though we get state match money on that, it's still a tax on the citizens and on our tax base. The first $100K of your assessment's excluded, but it's still on my tax. I still pay it. I still pay it as part of my tax bill.
But when we look at the big tax revenue bar graph that Christine had, it's not on there. Because it's not revenue to the town. It's similar to my argument about the wastewater treatment plant. It's not, yes, it's paid for as part of a bill that comes to you that you have no choice about paying, but it's not revenue to the town. Whereas these other purchases were made by the town out of things that could have been done for stuff like putting a new roof on the library when it needed it, or hiring more librarians, hiring more firemen, policemen, etc.
It's still land owned by the town. I disagree. It's still land owned by the town. Where the revenue source was is one, you can quibble over, but this is still deciding to use taxpayer dollars to purchase land.
The CPC, it's a surcharge on your tax bill. So it's the taxpayers are paying for it. They're paying it through a different vehicle, if you will. In this case, that one seemed to be fairly well thought out. They had a purpose in mind. They said what they were buying it for. They used CPC money. It's not so much problematic. I can put it over with the other ones, but it was buying land with taxpayer money.
So would that go into the we shouldn't have done it category in our recommendations?
No, I don't think so. I think that was that's
what we.
That's kind of what CPC's for.
But that's what we say on the next slide, and I'm wondering if we should indicate why that purchase was different. As we say, don't do it, don't buy land.
Well, we say no land purchase without clearly identifying the town purpose of owning the property. They clearly identified that was for recreation or open space, and one of the tenets of the CPC is you're supposed to put some money aside every year.
How does that fit in with the first bullet point?
Open space.
I would eliminate the first bullet point. I think you make that point very clear in the second bullet point. So I think you need in this slide.
Yeah.
I want to say freeze all land purchases out of general revenues and leave an exception for CPC.
We do, so if we get rid of this, we do say down here, as part of our response to the recession, we recommend a freeze across the board on land purchases that are not CPC funded.
Yeah, that's basically what the point we're trying to make is.
Right.
Well done.
Okay.
20 or 25% of the revenue of CPC funds every year has to be set aside or used for open space. That's part of the mandate. So.
Now, do we want to have a discussion in the future about how the CPC fund is accounting for their money? The fact that it's not that these purchases are being made fully with CPC funds, but that they're bonding. Roland, you had.
I think, as I've asked them before, and they didn't do it last year, to have them come in on a separate occasion, not dealing with their regular yearly, town warrant article, and come in with us and go over their accounting, and go over that type of thing. And I think that's important. We've asked them before, and they haven't done it. And we gave them ample times last year, and they didn't do it. And I'll reach out to them again this year, because I'm in the liaison. They're meeting tonight, I believe. But the next meeting is one of our meetings is, so. I will ask them to get on with the chair to do that, to come in and meet with us. And I'll let you know, we'll take it from there.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Takeaways.
I would put something in here about the income decreases. I'm still kind of blown away by how much that number's dropped.
Unemployment and income. Okay, and some of this we still don't know because we haven't seen the budget.
Yeah.
The state hasn't passed it, so it's sort of pending.
I think it looks good.
Excellent.
All right. We have nothing else on that topic. Let's move on to minutes. Did everyone get a chance to read the minutes Brian sent out?
Yeah, Brian, one of your Christine Russells is missing an L.
I had already mailed about my name, and I caught that afterwards. Thought maybe you wouldn't care as much as I do.
It's fine.
I decided at this point in my life, I'm going to make sure people spell my name correctly. All right. Assuming enough of us have read the minutes that we can take a vote on it, can I hear a motion?
Move we approve the minutes of January 8th, July 8th.
Second.
All right. We'll do a roll call vote now. Christine.
Aye.
Roland.
Aye.
Steve.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
Jason.
Abstain. I haven't read them.
Adam.
Aye.
Isha.
Abstain, I haven't read them.
Okay. Christy, I say aye. That passes. Next, we have liaison reports. Who would like to go first? All right, I can jump in. We had a very interesting ALG meeting. Let me see my notes here. Tax collections, as we heard, are normal. Brian will speak to us more about that at our meeting coming up in 2 weeks. There are some positions that will need to be filled in spite of their having had the hiring freeze at the end of last year. There has been no indication that the CARES money can be used for revenue replacement. The school has already had, and Christine might be able to speak to this later if she heard about it at the school committee. The beginning of October is when they do their count of what the population is, so this affects the funding they get. So that had not happened by the time we had our ALG meeting, but they should have that information now. The state aid, Chapter 70 aid, was actually lower than projected, but they've been using grants and other money to try to fill those things in. They've been having good conversation with both towns trying to get some of the CARES money. In the multi-year model that I sent out to everyone, they actually leave the deficit number for, I believe it's this year, is wrong. They double counted the small business grant. So the deficit is larger, indicated on there is larger than it should be. I decided to give a heads up to the committee of what we were thinking about being extremely conservative with spending this year. And it was not poorly received with the idea of having no tax increase. I wasn't exactly expecting it to be. And then there was a very strong negative reaction to the idea of having a cost-saving committee. In addition to the idea of there being no tax increase, there was this idea that we were asking too much of the staff of both the town and the schools, to ask them to not only in this busy time figure out how to look to cut costs in general, but to even right now consider what could be done to decrease taxes, this tax increase going into the next year. I said thank you, and that we would discuss it further.
Yep.
We'll keep talking about that with them. If anyone has anything they'd like me to bring back to the committee, please let me know. And the demolition is happening soon, and the site prep for the fire station. That's it. Did I miss anything? Jason.
I was going to jump into the last school committee meeting that I had a chance to cover this last round.
Sure.
So bear with me. I took notes, and I have not edited them yet, and I don't dare read my unedited notes out loud. Started out with a conversation about the mascot, and that some of the social media comments are perhaps not as polite as they could be, and things are harder to be polite as people are all remote. The Superintendent Light gave an update from COVID. This information obviously is quite stale. It's almost 11 days old now. But that there was one case at the high school and one at Miriam. They have changed the way they're doing their contact tracing emails. Close contact emails will go out first, and then the blanket email to the larger community will go out second. That seems like a perfectly reasonable thing for them to be doing. They thanked the Be Kind signs for being sent to the different schools. There will be more digital literacy seminars, and that they'll be translated to help families. A renewed interest on social emotional learning. Just a reminder that they're actively working on it. It's very close to the top of their mind, and that times are tough. The food services program has actually been in overdrive. The first distribution of 3,500 meals was a couple weeks ago. Then it went to 4,500 meals last week, and then they were at 5,700 meals in the current week. And again, this information is 11 days old.
Jason, is that the general meals they do to families?
Yes.
That's the drive up?
Yep, that's correct. So much so that it has outgrown the tent that they were in. It's now a purpose trailer. So definitely there is need and suffering in the community, and I'm very glad to see that the school district is stepping up where it can. Then there was a separate CPAC update. God, I can't remember what the acronym CPAC stands for, but it's the
Special Education Parent
Advisory Committee. Special Education Parent Advisory Committee. Thank you. And they, it seems like they're doing God's work, but they're also desperately asking people to get involved and desperately asking people to know that they're there and that they're working on everyone's behalf. Needless to say, all the plans have been interrupted by COVID. Clearly saying they're here to help, but not that many people reached out to them. Some parents have had to quit jobs to be able to handle the learn from home model, which has an economic impact on those families, and that they're actively doing a study that will come at the end of the month. The budget update. The budget update was a whole pile of, we don't know what the heck is going on, and we don't know if this hybrid model will still also be required in the next school year. I gotta say, there was an audible gasp when Director Berlino said that was something that we had to take into account. They did talk about wanting to push annual town meeting to revamp the budget process. You already heard about that from Board of Selectmen and from the Acton leadership group. Budget Saturdays are going to be later than normal this year. Sorry, I took a lot of notes, and I don't want to read them raw. The guidelines are to try to be as flexible and adapted to the uncertainty, allow for as many different models as possible. There is quite a bit of fear about what the governor's budget's going to be and what kind of an impact that's going to have. They never want to lose focus on social and emotional needs. Is there anything we can reuse to keep costs down? There was a conversation about earmarking specific programs to be untouchable, and I wish I don't want to comment on this too heavily because I don't believe there's a representative from the school committee here. I do not want to get out over my skis on this one. But there was and there were a bunch of follow-up questions on this bullet point as well about taking a couple of programs and saying these should not be cut or they should be the last to get cut. And that has by specifically prioritizing one program over another, or specifically saying that a program can't get cut at all, that means that the programs that are not on the priority list are going to have to suffer even deeper cuts to make that happen. They said E&D is slightly below target. There is conversation about, and the word that was used by the school board member was titrating, how to titrate the revolving accounts and the reserves. Some were hit harder than others. Sports and food, for example, were hit particularly hard. CIP took a slight pause this year, but other than that is moving along. And give me just a second.
CIP is the capital improvement?
That is correct. That is correct. For example, 3 different funds, sports, food, and I didn't capture the third one. Each of them lost $500,000 in the last year. The good news is the burn rate has stabilized, but the bad news is that the burn already occurred.
Kindergarten took an $800,000 hit.
Must have been the third one. Thank you. I only paid attention to the ones that took $500,000 or more.
Luckily, that one at ALG.
State has announced 2 rounds of CARES Act. We're now allowed to apply for the remainder of our original allocation. They're actively doing that, so kudos to them. We're looking out for funding sources elsewhere. They're also, Dave Berlino's team is actively looking at all grant opportunities, which is great. And kudos to them. We appreciate that, but we also really expect them to do that. They did get a $55,000 payment from FEMA, which was unusually fast. We were told not to expect that speed of payment in the future. I don't want to get into the in and outs of what everybody said. The chair of the school committee said that there's the very real possibility that next year kids will be behind educationally, as this current format leaves a lot to be desired. They did review whether or not they wanted to adjust their homework policy. They decided to punt it for a year. I don't think anyone's going to give them a hard time for that. Mr. Peterson Dr. Peterson did say that he announced, he heard at ALG that the Finance Committee wants to have a minimal tax increase. Minuteman is up 31% over the last year. State support is highly questionable. The school committee has reached out to our state representatives and our state senators. Bottom line is there's no news about funding at this time. The state legislature has been out on recess since July, and they're not going back until January. Apparently there is some interest among the state representatives to find funding for all-day K. Level funding for the rest of the school year is the current plan. They're also thinking about scrapping MCAS for a year or two to be able to focus on educational goals without focusing on teaching to the test. But they didn't say that, I did. But they're also, by not having to worry about MCAS, they're able to put a greater emphasis both on basic education and on social and emotional learning. And I'm sorry that's such a long report, but I haven't done the school committee report in 2 years.
Thanks for covering for me, Jason. I was on a college visit in Maine with my oldest.
Happy to do it. I've forgotten what the school committee meetings were like.
Anyone else?
I can give you the planning board. It'll take 2 seconds. They provisionally approved the subdivision at 40 High Street. The subdivision at 46 High Street is well underway, and the subdivision at Elm Street has not submitted all the documents that they're supposed to submit. That's all.
Yeah, thank you. Mike?
That was 9 seconds.
Yeah, the planning board is going to have on the 15th, which is in 2 days, a forum about drive-up windows. I don't know if anyone's interested, or if that's going to be a subject that would become that would be a finance committee interest. I know the EDC, I think, would be very interested. And well, anyway, that's the 15th at 7 o'clock via Zoom. And then the town is you might start seeing signs up about support your community, shop local, eat local. At for Jason's benefit, there's no cost to the town. It's all privately funded. So
No,
we're good.
we already spent that money.
Well, enjoy. Just eat local.
Anyone else? All right, I'd like to entertain a motion. And I believe it's Isha's job.
I motion that we end this meeting.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Wonderful. All right, Christine,
Aye.
Roland,
Aye.
Steve,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Jason,
Aye.
Adam,
Aye.
Isha,
Aye.
and Christy. I say aye. Thank you, everyone. Good night. I'll see you in 2 weeks.
Good night. Take care, everyone.